Welcome to the Taylor Method for Pain-Free Living, a podcast that features enlightening conversations with experts in the medical field that helps to improve the health and well-being of those suffering from chronic pain due to injury. Learn from leading authorities the questions you should be asking to experience pain-free living. Hosted by father and son, Dr. Derek Taylor and Dr. Hudson Taylor, and joined by industry professionals in the health field, including doctors of integrative medicine and personal injury attorneys. Enjoy well-rounded and informative conversations to help you get out of pain while achieving optimal wellness. Dr. Derek Taylor and Dr. Hudson Taylor are the doctors of Taylor Chiropractic and Laser Center in Florida and California. Both father and son duo have earned respect and a solid reputation for successfully helping people transform their lives by assisting them to discover the hidden causes of their painful health challenges, leading them to experience the resolution of their problems using the Taylor Method. Tune in each week to learn about the Taylor Method, Dr. Taylor's proprietary technology that looks at the whole person and identifies the root cause of pain while facilitating natural healing and helps to restore the body to optimal wellness without using drug injections or surgery.
Okay, so this is Dr. Derek Taylor. I'm here with Dr. Hudson Taylor, and we are interviewing our guest, April Torres. April Torres is a naturopath and who has been in the field of health and loves to help people get healthy and lose their pain and just experience optimal health. So, April, welcome to the call.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it very much and count it a joy and privilege for sure.
Yeah, great. So tell us about your background. What got you involved in naturopathy?
Dr. Taylor, my story is not unusual at all. I have the blessing of having 4 wonderful children. My second oldest at the age of 15, who up to that point had been healthy, got walking pneumonia. And it actually, what they believe, broke through the blood-brain barrier and gave him mycoplasma encephalitis. In the midst of the story, the incredible part is how the doctors, although I genuinely believe they did everything within their power on the conventional side to help my son, his seizures continued in spite of a almost 2-week coma. I remember when we went from the regional hospital and was transferred to St. Pete All Children's Hospital. I remember being received by a wonderful group of doctors, and they informed me that the issue was not that Derek was having several seizures or many seizures, but that he was actually having one constant seizure. And they had to put him into an induced phenobarbital coma. And the actually epileptologist came out and said, the good news is we were able to get the seizures to stop through this phenobarb coma. But the sobering concern at this point is that we had to give him 6 bolus of phenobarb in order to place him into the coma. And obviously at that point, I had no idea what that meant. And so when I asked the endocrinologist, or excuse me, the hepatologist, what that meant, he informed me that it was enough medicine to put down Tyrannosaurus Rex. So at this moment, I realized, as the doctor continued to give clarity, that Derek only had 1% chance of life. And he apologized at that point and said, Ms. Torres, I'm obviously sorry that we had to give Derek that much medicine. That is the most in the history of all children's that we've ever had to give a child. But that was kind of our only recourse. So as we waited and days turned into weeks, the one thing I knew was this, as I looked at him on life support with 16 tubes, and I know many clients and patients can relate to this. You kind of stand there wondering, what does this look like? And I would actually pray with him every morning. We read from Psalms. We had actually just gone to a Chris Tomlin concert, and I had a friend who sent me a CD, and by Chris Tomlin, How Great Is Our God. And actually another friend, and they didn't know one another. It's just kind of how the Lord worked it out, but they sent me a CD player. And from the moment my son went into his coma, I played How Great Is Our God on repeat. Now, the great thing about a coma in that long of a duration, all the doctors and nurses and ID guys could sing with me by the end of the coma. But April, he was in a coma for, at that point, about, I think, 10 days. And I went out into the hall like I did every morning. And I told Derek, that was, of course, in his active coma, that I loved him. And good morning, walked out, met the other moms in the hallway. We would give each other the updates and pray over our kids. And I was heading back to my room. And the nurse practitioner stopped me and she said, "Hey, there's somebody that wants to say hi." And I ran to my room and walked in the door. And Derek looked up with one eye and he looked at me and he said, "Good morning, I love you." And obviously for me, that was a game changer. And we did intensive in-house OT, ST, PT. I had doctors coming from all over the hospital. I had the transport team from Central Florida come. Everybody said the exact same thing. There is no medical reason that your son should be alive. And the interesting thing of that is when you go through these processes, you wonder, often what they can hear or they can't hear. But the interesting thing is, for the next few days, every morning when Derek would wake up, he would actually be humming "How Great Is Our God." And so I believe they hear. I believe he knew, and I believe the Lord was very, very kind in that. As his journey to recovery continued, we had to go through extensive rehabilitation. We had to learn how to walk and talk and our ABCs, our 1, 2, 3s. He excelled rapidly to the point where we actually put him into 10th grade the following year. And he had been seizure free for about 90 days at that point, which we were incredibly grateful for. And mid-August, I got the dreaded call from the school that Derek had in fact gone down with a grand mal seizure again. And at this point, I kind of realized that we have probably exhausted all the resources that I knew. We headed back to St. Pete, and the doctors there informed us we had done everything that we could do, every AED, every cocktail, and now he is labeled with intractable, which is not treatable epilepsy. So we went on the hunt for another hepatologist and was able to locate one in Orlando. And they wanted to do a steroid therapy protocol, which is just basically a week of high-level steroids, and hope to resolve any underlying inflammatory response. And unfortunately, he walked out of that with medicinally induced diabetes. And so now we're stacked. And Derek continued to have seizures. We were approached with the venous vein stimulator, which he was in adolescence. I wasn't comfortable with messing with his spinal cord at all. And then the other surgery that they had suggested was what is called a corpus callosotomy. And that is basically where they go in and they cut the corpus callosum, which is basically the highway between the two hemispheres of the brain. They cut that in two in hopes to allow the seizures that generalize so quickly to slow down. At this point, Derek's having seizures. He's falling over, hitting his face, breaking teeth, hitting his head. So obviously, it was not helpful to him at all. The statistics were going in. I had even reached out at this point to Benjamin Carson. The statistics at this point were that 80% of tonic-clonic patients have 50% less seizures. And 10% of them, unbeknownst to the doctors, don't know why, but they actually stop having seizures. So my Derek was very comfortable with that, and he decided to go in and do it. And when he came out, unfortunately, being the unique case that we are, Derek came out with 200% more seizures. And I remember it was a very defining moment in my, as a mom. I remember standing before probably some of the best brain surgeons and hepatologists, I believe, in the country, perhaps the world. And I remember standing in front of them and them going through all the scans and the MRIs, and I looked over at the monitor at Derek in his room, and a nurse had been bringing him red Jello. And I looked over at the doctor panel and I said, guys, you're going to have to forgive me. I said, I genuinely believe that you have done everything that you know to do at this point, but we are at a crossroads. And I said, you see that wonderful nurse doing a very good job at her, a very good job giving my son a snack. And they were like, yeah. And I said, when that red Jello actually hits my son's gut, he's going to go into a 4 to 7 grand mal seizure. Their response was a little bit maybe of the rolling of the eyes. But I finished my conversation with him because, in fact, I did know that he was going to go into a seizure, and I ran to his room, and no more did I get in there. And Derek did, in fact, have a 5-minute grand mal seizure. And when I turned around, my hepatologist was standing in the doorway, and he goes, Ms. Torres, what do you want to do? And I said, Doc, I want to take my son home. And that began an incredibly hands-on approach to navigating Derek's world. Now, what that meant was, yes, I'm the crazy mom that set up the infrared camera in her son's room. My bedroom became ground zero. I had computers up and case studies. I started logging everything he ate, his sleep cycles, how far into REM he potentially got before he had the seizures, the way his body would posture, what he ate, how much exercise, when his seizures were, how long they were, what side did he posture on, what side do I believe it came from. And I collected all of this data because I knew at that point I was going to be my son's best advocate. And I believe it was no mistake. I don't believe that the Lord makes mistakes. And I knew that this was intended somehow for good. So as time progressed, Derek went from having the 200% more seizures coming out of the corpus callosotomy. And I took him home, and honestly, guys, I didn't do anything crazy. I didn't do anything that anyone would say was out of the normal. I literally gave him a whole food diet. If it came out of the ground, I washed it, cooked it, and gave it to the kid. I let him sleep. Sometimes he slept 16 to 18 hours a day. The miraculous thing was that 2 days went by, week goes by, 2-3 weeks go by, he's seizure free. We have a post-op visit back at the hospital in Orlando, and we get there, and the doctor looks at Derek and says, you know, son, you look good. He said, how many seizures have you had? And to which Derek replied, none. And the doctor looked at me and he goes, well, I know you haven't had any today, but how many have you had? And he goes, no, seriously, I've had none. And the doctor looked over at me like I had one or two things. I was either lying or I had absolutely lost my mind. And the doctor looked at my son again and said, well, how in the world do you know? And he goes, listen, you don't know my mom. My mom has gone rogue. I have infrared cameras in my room. I have this machine from Germany under my mattress. If I go longer than 5 seconds, then alarms go off in her room. So trust me, I haven't had a seizure. And so our family at that point, Derek's seizures at that point went from maybe, I would say 1 every 2 weeks, maybe. And as I started to gather data, I realized there were specific things that would trigger his seizures. Photosensitivity. He would look at his phone or computer or TV without a backlight on, it would trigger a seizure. Anything with MSG, you know, we live in a culture where we're so used to just anything coming in a package, we just kind of take it for granted that it's good for us. And, you know, when I say MSG, everybody thinks it's the MSG we put into Chinese food, but ultimately the face of MSG has changed so exponentially that it is there's literally over 5,000 names for it now, and it changes every day. It's anything that preserves food. And so And so between the food and exercise, he could exercise at a low impact level, but for him to go out and play soccer, which he loves so much right away, it would excite the neurotoxins and he would go into a seizure. So we had to learn what made Derek tick, what things was his body able to navigate through well, and then where were the holes in his armor. We ended up relocating to West Palm Beach. My concern was that obviously I wasn't going to find a good naturopath. I had always taken my kids to integrative health, whether it was their GP or chiropractor, whatever. And we ended up coming down here, and I was able to find a really good naturopath. And as I'm collecting this data and kind of helping Doc navigate through the blueprints and what his stressors look like, and some of the info from that, this naturopath looked at me and he goes, "You know what, April, you need to do this." And I kind of laughed and I thought, I need to do what? I'm trying to raise a family of 4, and I have a son that has some unique qualities that we're trying to work through. And he goes, "No, seriously." He said, there are things that you're able to associate with that not everyone can. And so I was encouraged, and I thought it through, prayed it through from every angle, tried to give every excuse I could why I should not go back to college at 40. And then I did. I ended up going to Trinity School of Natural Health, and I received my certificate as a health specialist, and went on my second year to receive a certification as a natural health professional. And then for 2 years proceeded to get my doctorate in naturopathy, and am a certified holistic health practitioner now. So the nothing is wasted. I have many clients that will come into me and ask me, how I got into this. And I'm always delighted to tell the story, because I think sometimes when we're in the midst of it and it's hard and it's heavy and it's kind of hard to see hope, that the Lord is kind. He never wastes anything, for which I'm very grateful for.
Wow.
Dr. Torres, this is Dr. Hudson Taylor. I just really wanted to thank you for sharing this incredible, really just life-changing story. So thank you. I had a question for you. It came to mind in the beginning of you sharing. Would you mind just kind of refreshing what exactly did the doctor apologize about in the beginning of this when Derek was in really critical condition? You said that the doctor apologized to you.
Yes.
What exactly did the doctor apologize over?
Well, the interesting fact was this. He knew, obviously, that this endless seizure had to stop. And the biggest concern was that 6 bolus of phenobarb is the equivalent to put down Tyrannosaurus Rex. So, his exact verbiage was, "You know what, the seizures for sure would have killed him, but he has less than a 1% chance of life." And that's when he said, "I'm sorry." And I genuinely think that he knew that the level and the amount of medication that he gave Derek, and expressing it was the most that All Children's had ever given any child, was very, very concerning to him.
Got it.
Quite a story, April. Thanks for sharing that. So you then got certified in naturopathy at Trinity School, I believe you said. And then what do you do basically to, what is it exactly that you do as a naturopath?
Well, and naturopathy, the interesting thing is this: we make life incredibly simple. I think that we get so overwhelmed in such a fast pace that sometimes we forget to slow down and self-assess. And one of the things in naturopathy that the goal is always is that we can educate our clients to understand exactly where their stressors lie. I want my clients when they leave to be able to say, this is where I know I am, and this is the trajectory of where I want to go, and this is the toolage that I'm going to need to do. And we customize strategies, just like I did with Derek, on how to navigate stressors. And this is the important thing too, that I think it bears some clarity on. You know, in the world we live in now, there are so many stressors that are unprecedented. There are things that we are experiencing now that for generations we haven't experienced. And so we kind of just look at these things and we accept them as the normal. And in fact, they're not. And I kind of went back to a very simplistic form, and just wanting to maybe be helpful. And it's just, what is stress? You know, and stress in humans can result from actually many things: interactions between people, environmental conditions, contaminations, emotional situations, even interactions which are perceived by the body as straining or exceeding the adaptive capacity or threatening the well-being of the body. And I don't think that we think that exhaustively about it. We kind of just become an adaptogen and we go with the flow. And so the goal is to educate the client that the physical fact is that every substance has its own unique signal. It is actually an energetic fingerprint. And when that energetic fingerprint is introduced actually into our environment, one of 3, 4 different things happen. We either assimilate, utilize, and eliminate excess, or we have a pushback which creates a stressor. And I think the interesting thing, and I always share this story with my clients when it comes to trying to explain what I do. I said it would be like me going and relocating, and I buy a home and I get a state-of-the-art alarm system. Man, I put sensors on every window, on every door. I mean, for crying out loud, I put them on the doggy door. I am covered. I set my alarm, I go to bed, I'm in REM 3 sleep, I'm cranking it out, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and my alarm system goes off. Well, I'm startled, and I jump out of bed, I grab my baseball bat, I run to the alarm system that's absolutely deafening, and I smack it with my baseball bat, and I'm ecstatic that this deafening alarm has gone off. I turn around, I go back to bed and go to sleep. In the morning, I wake up, and unbeknownst to me, I have been robbed blind. I call 911, the officer comes out, he walks into my house and he says, Ms. Torres, you have a state-of-the-art alarm system. You have gone out of your way at great cost to make sure every vulnerable area of your home is covered. And yet dispatch just told me that they called you at 2 a.m. and that zone 2 had been compromised. And it looks to me that you might have broke your alarm. And I look at the police officer and I said, listen, you have no idea. I was in sleep. I was out. My body was rebooting and healing. And I was startled. And all I wanted was for that alarm to stop ringing. So I hit it with a baseball bat. That's exactly how we often handle stressors.
Apologies, April. You got me thinking when you talked about the stressors earlier, and just how, we're carrying stressors now that we haven't had before. It made me think, just how do you identify those stressors in each patient? What methods do you use to really pinpoint just those stressors, and how do you catch those? How do you identify?
Sure. Well, I think it helps to know what a stressor is. It can be any biological, chemical, emotional, physical substance. It can even be a factor that causes the body to have a strain or even an inappropriate response to the particular stressor, which can lead to temporary or permanent harm. Um, they can be internal, they can be external, and they have been shown to contribute to many symptoms and illnesses. And so oftentimes when stressors are going off, we're looking at potential symptoms. And oftentimes we get a headache and we want to say, oh, I want to run and go take my over the counter or whatever. And in essence, Dr. Taylor, what we're doing is we're silencing our alarm. And in naturopathy, we want to get to the seated issue. And a lot of times what brings conflict is that it takes time. It takes
And
sitting down. It takes looking at your environment, your work environment, your home environment, your relationships, and it takes a lot of conversation. But the goal is always, and this is the question I often get asked as well. You know, you have people that will come in with specific diagnoses, and obviously, being a holistic health practitioner, I don't treat, diagnose, or prescribe anything, and so in not a disconnected kind of way, but I don't deal with disease at all. But when you start to address the body, and the body understands how it needs to be equipped to heal, you now are looking at appropriate response to having an upward trajectory up to your goal. Now, sometimes does it systemically affect those underlying issues that you may have a concern with? Absolutely. But we always start with the ground foundation and we work up. It has to be, we have to look at what's, again, seems to be very fundamental.
So as a patient, starting from the ground up, if I were to walk into your office and get evaluated, what would you do? Would you do blood work? Would you do muscle testing? Would you do an exam?
I
Is
do
it all
not.
pinpointed through a history? Is it,
Sure,
you know?
sure. Great question. Well, I do not do blood work here.
Okay.
I do muscle testing.
Muscle
And
testing, got it.
yep, we kind of just go through a lot of questionnaires, protocols, history. You know, I encourage families to come in, and honestly, you know, I think the one thing that money could never buy is obviously time, but it's the one thing that we cannot afford to be stingy with. And I literally sit down with my clients, and intakes are sometimes 2 and 3 hours. And I understand that that is a long time, but it's very important as you start peeling back the layers and we start getting into, okay, so talk to me about grandma and grandpa and mom and dad and siblings and where you live and where you work and where you were born, and the concerns that they bring to the table. And you start peeling back the layers, it's miraculous things happen. I always laugh and joke, and you never eat a carrot and say beta carotene, go to my eyes. I believe that we were fearfully and wonderfully made, and that our body was created to know what to do with what we give it. It's just when we give our bodies things that it cannot identify, which is GMOs and chemicals and metals and things that it can assimilate and utilize, those things have the potential to stress. So we just ask probably questions, Dr. Taylor, that are not probably in the normal thought pattern.
So you go through your questions, you really get to know the person and just all the factors involved, and then from there, when you move more into your specific, you know, to really get down to the specifics with what's causing their condition, is that when you move into the muscle testing? And when you move into the muscle testing, you know, how do you, what exactly are you testing? Is it like their body's, nervous system, or they're like are there, reflex points, or, meridian points, or just do you test them on a product or a food, or like what exactly, are you digging into with that?
Sure. Well, obviously if I always tell my clients, if you were to pull the skin off, you have an electrical grid basically underneath your skin. And there are pressure points, you have meridians, you have 6 right, 6 left, a front mid-central, a back mid-central. And there's no solo act in the body. Everything is connected. And so we go through muscle test, different areas maybe of concern. And I obviously am looking for areas that could potentially need some support in equipping the body to better navigate stressors. So that's my biggest goal, is to be able to educate the client as to how to move forward again in that upper trajectory with a customized toolkit. And that is all, is basically what I do.
And then
Got
once
it.
you identify these stressors, April, how do you help your clients reduce them, or eliminate them, or
Sure. Well,
address them so that they improve?
sure. Well, the goal in being able to navigate through this, I'll give you a perfect example. I had a case the other day of a client that had come in, and she has legitimate stressors that are affecting her, from her job to her home life to extended family, and just, the foods that she's choosing to eat, and literally just sat down with me and just said, April, I am just a hot mess. And so the goal is to take every single one of those and simplistically get back to, okay, so how are you doing fun, sweaty activity? Are you covering that 20 minutes a day? Are you drinking half of your body weight in ounces of water a day? Are you getting the 7 to 8 hours of sleep that your body needs for healthy regeneration? And just basically going through each one of those categories and being able to have her self-assess. Because the goal is always to equip the client so the client is able to be in that environment and be able to navigate through, oh, this is my body's response when this happens. And this is potentially where, there's holes in my armor as far as extended family. But you want them to be able to identify that, so they're equipped to navigate it in a healthy fashion.
And
Yes.
April, I'm sorry, Dr. Taylor.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
What exactly would you say like your specialty is as a naturopath? Like, do you focus primarily on like addressing foods that are maybe harming someone, or like other stressors in their house, or they're all of the above, or if I had an issue, or if I wanted to know who to go to help my my issue, what do you primarily specialize in really addressing? What's your key area of expertise, or is it just kind of a little bit of everything?
Well, there with the 5G, I think that there's stressors everywhere, whether they're in our homes or in our hands or on our wrists, or our computer screens or our TVs or whatever. So EMF is a huge stressor, for sure. But as far as my specialty, again, this is the interesting part. And this is what's so hard, because we're just not taught it. But in the most simplistic form of how I know to be helpful in explaining the specialty of what I do is this: every single thing that has mass has an electrical has an electrical thumbprint. Everything from what we eat to what we do, to the exercises that we do, to the colors we like, to the music we like. What's your favorite food? Why is that your favorite food? Every single one of these things have an electrical blueprint to them. And I'm not talking mysticism and hokey pokey kind of stuff, but when those things enter our environment, we are again going to have different responses to them. And so the specialty in what I do is being able to take bioresonant feedback and be able to say, okay, if your body was exposed to, would you be equipped to navigate it? And so my goal is to get the client to the place where their body is able to become and generate a level of health that is optimal to them.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Well, Heather, April, in regards to all that you've shared, it sounds like you have a wealth of information that you supply your clients and they're greatly benefited underneath your care. I just wanted to ask you, for our listeners, what advice would you give them in regards to overall health and living a pain-free life and just, experiencing more optimal wellness in their lives?
Absolutely. Well, I think one thing that is helpful, especially right now, is I think we need to be sober-minded about maybe looking at things a little bit differently than we have before. I work with doctors all over the country. I think that sometimes people think that in naturopathy that it is a direct offense to conventional medicine, and yet I work with doctors across the country that we agree to disagree at some points, but I would want the best of both worlds for sure. So I always tell my clients, if you ever get your finger cut off, do not come to me. I did not pass home ec, and you do not want me sewing that finger back on for sure. But I think that it's helpful to be able to say, you know what, I have gone and potentially have done things a certain way for a long time, and it's just not working. And when I stood in front of those doctors many years ago, and I said to them, just let me take my son home, I knew that they did everything that they could potentially do that was within their wheelhouse for my son. But sometimes we need to be willing, as uncomfortable or maybe as and get educated. And I think that the problem is that we may follow certain philosophies or thinking, and we just don't give sometimes the most profoundly simple at points things like homeopathy and naturopathy a fair shake. I think that it's helpful to be able to think in a way that where prevention is the best cure. And if we're proactively pursuing a healthy lifestyle, does it mean we'll never get sick? No, I think on the flip side of it as well, that we need to be honest with our field and sometimes its limitations. It doesn't mean that you're always going to achieve what you presume is optimum health. But I do know this, that if you consistently give your body what it needs, from food, from water, to exercise, to understanding environmental stressors and how your body specifically responds to these stressors. If you have a customized toolkit and you are proactive when those situations come, when those stressors come in, we are more readily equipped to deal with them. We are not reactive, but because of our discipline, we are able to be responsive. And I think that mindset is just incredibly helpful in a day and age when there has the propensity to be a lot of fear integrated in our everyday lives.
April, what you just said really, really was really powerful. Prevention is the best cure, and that's something that we don't hear that at all today, across any sort of mainstream media or anything. I haven't heard that said in a long time, aside from just those who really stand firm in natural health. But I think if man, that's just powerful, And I think if we can proactively work, as you said, to work on just being ready to adapt and to respond to these stressors that may come up, we're just going to all live healthier lives, And so thank you for sharing that. It made me think: is there anything else, that you would, if you were to leave the listener with anything? I mean, that alone, prevention is the best cure, is powerful. But is there anything else, that comes to mind, that if you were to leave us with anything?
Yeah, there's so much to be said, for sure. I think we honestly need to take the time to slow down, and to really get to do some self-assessing. I think a lot of us are fearful of what we may find, but I think in our haste to be busied, often accomplishing little, we negate the God-given responsibility to be able to navigate through our lives in a meaningful manner. And honestly, we don't live for just ourselves, and what we do, what we say, affects everyone around us. And I think we need to be mindful and considerate of others in that as well. And we're being an example, we're being an example to our mates and to our children and those of us around us, that it is important. It does matter what you put in your mouth. It does matter what comes out of your mouth. It does matter that we genuinely are able to be as healthy, and our health is as optimal as it can be, because we're here to serve. We're genuinely here to serve one another. And I think that if we're not healthy, if we're living in pain, if we have got so many stressors we can't think straight, how in the world are we going to go home to our families? Are we going to go to work and be productive and be able to have a heart of servitude?
That's a great note to end on there, April. We appreciate so much all that you've shared. How can our listeners get a hold of you? What's the best number that they can reach you at? Or email?
Sure. My phone number is going to be 863-559-8290. And I'll repeat that: 863-559-8290. And then my email is going to be healthybydesign, and then the number 44@gmail.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much again for your time. This has been quite a fascinating interview with you. I love your holistic, whole person approach, and that the last words you said were just so timely. We all just really do need to slow down and reflect. And I think we get in trouble and we add these stressors when we add too much on our plates and we're going a little bit too fast. And that's a great way to end this interview. Our guest has been April Torres, certified naturopathic practitioner. I, Dr. Derek Taylor, and Dr. Hudson Taylor appreciate you being on the show with us, and all you listeners for listening in with us. And we look forward to our next show. And thanks again for this wonderful interview. Have a great
Thank you so
April,
much.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Truly my joy.
Thank you for listening to the Taylor Method for Pain-Free Living podcast. For more information about the Taylor Method and how you can find lasting pain relief, visit www.drderektaylor.com. That's www.drderektaylor.com.